They gave him everything, $500,000, a second chance, their blind loyalty. And me, just expectations, silence, and now intrusion. When my parents sold their business, I thought maybe they'd retire, travel, breathe. Instead, they packed their bags and moved into my home without even asking. I walked in and they were already there, unpacking, smiling like it was normal, as if it wasn't my name on the deed, as if I owed them my life. I didn't confront them that night. I just stood there, numb, one question repeating in my head. Is blood really thicker than betrayal? Thanksgiving always brought a strange calm to my parents' home. A manicured little house in Vermont that smelled permanently of cinnamon and old secrets. The neighbourhood adored them, sweet Mrs. Langley with her homemade pies, and Mr. Langley, who used to run the most charming bakery on Main Street. They were local legends. People smiled wider around them. Strangers trusted them on sight. I used to trust them too. When I pulled into their driveway that chilly afternoon, I was greeted by the warm glow of window lights and the sound of Kyle's exaggerated laughter spilling out from inside. For a moment it felt safe, familiar. I hesitated at the door, remembering being 12 and terrified to tell them I'd failed a math test. Back then, Kyle had broken a neighbour's window the same day and got a hug for being so honest about it. Funny how some things never changed. Inside, everything looked picture perfect. The dining table was set like a magazine spread. White linens, fall-themed centerpieces, silverware arranged with surgical precision. Mum floated from kitchen to table, humming softly, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Dad called out, "There she is, our big success!" And Kyle raised a glass of wine, grinning. "The breadwinner returns." The performance was flawless. They hit every mark, hugs, jokes, passive-aggressive compliments. I sat at the table, smiled when expected, and let their rehearsed warmth wash over me. Every time I mentioned work, my promotion, the recent partnership project, someone changed the subject. But when Kyle talked about being between opportunities and trying to find himself, Mum clasped his hand with misty eyes. Dad nodded solemnly, like Kyle had just survived war. Later, while clearing dishes, I stood at the sink beside Mom. The clink of plates, the soft running water, the silence between words. It all felt like the quiet before something cracked. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "it must get lonely, all that space in your house, no one to come home to." I looked over, puzzled. "I like my space." She smiled faintly. "Still, a big house like that, just for one person?" Then she dried her hands and walked away, leaving the scent of lavender soap and something unspoken. The next morning, I stepped outside for a walk and passed by a neighbour holding a flyer. She handed it to me without thinking. My parents' bakery sold. "Congratulations," she said. "So bittersweet, huh? You must be proud of them for finally retiring." I blinked. "On what?" "They sold it 2 weeks ago, closed the deal fast, heard it went for a great price." I stared at the flyer, their smiling faces on the front. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Back inside, breakfast was already underway. Kyle was pouring syrup over pancakes like it was a victory ritual. I dropped the flyer on the table. "You sold the bakery?" Mom looked up, startled. "Oh, that? Yes, we meant to tell you." Dad nodded, sipping coffee. "Wasn't really your business, honey." "You always said the business was our legacy." Kyle snorted. "Relax, it's not like you were going to run it." I turned to them. "Where did the money go?" Mum touched my hand gently. Kyle needed a fresh start. He's been through a rough time, Maddie. You gave him everything? He's our son, Dad said flatly. I'm your daughter. They stared at me as if I were being difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. Kyle leaned back in his chair, arms folded. You have your career, your house, your perfect little life. I've had to start over. Because you burned through your last startup, I snapped. Mum's voice was sharp now. That's enough, Madeline? The table was quiet. I stood, heart pounding. I wasn't told. I wasn't asked. Mum said softly, Kyle's the one who needs saving right now. I stared at her, at all of them. The golden light in that house flickered slightly, and for the first time in a long time, I saw past the shine. The smiles were painted on, the love was conditional, the legacy was never meant for me. I gathered my coat. Mom followed me to the door, placing a hand on my arm. Try to understand. You're strong, Madeline. Kyle isn't. I looked her dead in the eyes. Maybe it's time he learned to be. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed, a text from Kyle. Looking forward to seeing the place. Heard you've got a guest room. I read it twice. Then I sat behind the wheel and tried not to scream. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I was back in my own home, trying to settle into a peace that never quite arrived. Silence, once my sanctuary, now felt loaded, too aware, too sharp. Something was off. My routines, coffee at 6, yoga by 7, emails by 8, no longer brought grounding. Instead, every corner of my house echoed with the weight of conversations I hadn't finished. Then came the email. Subject, temporary stay from Kyle Langley. Hey sis, just wanted to give you a heads up. I'll be moving in for a bit next week. Things have been rough. Mum said you'd understand. Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way. Appreciate it. There was no question mark. No, is that okay? Just a statement. I reread it 3 times. My hands trembled. Not with fear, but with the slow simmer of disbelief. He didn't ask. He didn't even pretend to ask. And Mum said like it was a royal decree. I called her immediately. Did you tell Kyle he could move into my house? Her voice was sweet, patient, too sweet. He's your brother, Madeline. He just needs a place to land for a while. This is my home, mine. And I told him to be respectful. He won't get in your way. You don't see a problem with this? She sighed. Why are you always making things harder than they need to be? That sentence landed like a slap. My jaw locked. All my childhood came rushing back. The blame, the expectation, the tightrope walk between being the good daughter and the villain of the story. Kyle arrived the following Tuesday. A moving truck pulled up just before noon. Not a suitcase, not a duffel. A truck, furniture, boxes, speakers, a damn gaming chair. I opened the door in my bathrobe, stunned. You brought a whole apartment, Kyle grinned. Well, you've got the space. That night, over takeout, he recounted a tale of crypto investments gone wrong, told like a comedy sketch. My parents, who'd come to help him settle in, laughed until they cried. I sat quietly, absorbing it all. When I asked if he planned to get a job soon, Dad frowned. He's rebuilding, Maddie. Let him breathe. Kyle added, You work too much. That's why you're always so tense. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled, that old, practiced smile, the one that kept things nice. But inside, something was shifting. I began to notice the small things first. My espresso machine had been moved. My favourite mug gone. Kyle's shoes by the door. His loud music bleeding through walls. My bathroom now had someone else's razor. someone else's scent. He didn't stay out of my way. He spread into the space like ink into water. One morning, I passed by the living room and stopped cold. The gallery wall I had painstakingly curated with travel photos, diplomas, memories, had been rearranged. In place of the centerpiece photo, me in front of my first home, was a large framed image of our family. But not just any photo, it was cropped. Kyle in the center, my parents flanking him. I was missing. I stood there, heart hammering, as if someone had erased me from my own history. When I confronted him, he shrugged. Mum brought it over, said it felt more homey. I texted her, demanding an explanation. Her reply was immediate. It's just a photo. Don't be so dramatic. I wasn't losing control. I had already lost it. The house no longer felt like mine. It felt occupied, colonized. The boundaries were dissolving, and I couldn't tell if I was losing space or losing myself. The worst part wasn't the objects shifting, the sounds invading, or even the total disregard. It was how my logic, my anger, my sense of injustice were constantly met with soft voices and hard denial. I just want what's best for all of us. You always overthink everything. He's had a harder life than you. You're strong, Madeline. You'll be fine. Each statement like a pinprick, 1,000 tiny needles that made me question my reality, my feelings, my right to defend my own damn home. And yet, outside of this twisted dynamic, no one saw it. To friends and colleagues, I was the lucky one, successful, independent, put together. But in this hidden pocket of my life, I was being erased. One smile, one assumption, one manipulated moment at a time. That night I walked through the house alone, lights dimmed, I passed by the photo again, my absence screamed louder than any argument. I touched the frame and, with trembling fingers, took it off the wall. Then I sat in the dark, clutching the frame to my chest, wondering when exactly I had stopped being someone's daughter and started being their real estate plan. The day I stopped knocking on my own bedroom door was the day something inside me cracked. It was late, past 11. I'd just come back from a client dinner, my heels in one hand, keys in the other. The house was quiet but not empty. It hadn't been mine for weeks. But tonight, it betrayed me in a new way. I walked down the hallway, muscles aching, craving only the comfort of my own bed. I opened the door. Kyle was sprawled across my mattress, shirtless, laptop balanced on his stomach. My clothes were folded neatly on the dresser. My mother turned around, holding a pair of my socks like she was placing offerings at a shrine. "Oh, hi, honey," she said, like this was normal. I was just helping organize a bit. Kyle needed the space. My voice came out sharp. "This is my room." Kyle didn't even flinch. "Just for a few nights. Chill. Get out." Mum's eyes welled up instantly, tears glistening like premeditated weapons. "You don't have to be cruel. He's your brother. This isn't about kindness. This is about boundaries." Dad appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "He's family. This is a family home." "No," I snapped. "This is my home, bought with my money. You don't get to act like—" Kyle sat up. "Technically, this house came from Grandma's estate, so really, it belongs to all of us." I laughed. A bitter, hollow thing. "Are you seriously?" Dad interrupted. "Actually, that's not entirely wrong. We looked into the deed. There were some things that weren't updated properly. So we had the paperwork adjusted." I blinked. "You what?" Kyle smirked. "It's called shared ownership, Maddie. Don't be so territorial. You forged paperwork? Dad's tone was cold. We corrected a mistake. It's what Grandma would have wanted. I couldn't speak. My lungs tightened, my chest burning. I turned and walked out, my feet unsure whether to run or collapse. In my room, the guest room now, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar mattress, heart thudding. I stared at my hands, willing them to stop shaking. The next morning, I called my lawyer. He confirmed what I already feared. Someone had filed a claim of co-ownership on the property using outdated transfer documentation from the estate. It wasn't fully legal, but it would take months, maybe longer, to untangle. Meanwhile, they had just enough ground to stall eviction. I hung up and stared at the wall until it blurred. Sleep eluded me for days. I stopped working, emails piled up, my once disciplined life reduced to avoidance, apathy, medication. At night I lay awake counting ceiling cracks, wondering how many micro-decisions led me here. Was it letting them stay one night? Was it choosing silence when I should have screamed? The worst wasn't the invasion, it was the erasure. Then came the Facebook post, a photo of Kyle and my parents on the front porch, my porch, smiling like a Hallmark ad. The caption, "Family means everything. Some of us remember that, even when others forget." The likes piled up, comments too. Such a beautiful family. You're lucky to have each other. Shame on anyone who doesn't appreciate this. And then a reply from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I always knew she was ungrateful, all that success and still selfish. I felt it in my gut, like nausea, like betrayal, like being slapped in public by someone you love. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The house felt smaller with each passing day. Their presence grew louder, heavier. Kyle started bringing over friends, hosting late-night hangouts. My fridge was always half empty, my pantry raided, my voice ignored. One night I found a note taped to the bathroom mirror. "Maybe you should take a vacation. You seem tense. Kyle." That night I cried, not the angry kind, the quiet kind, the kind that dries out your bones and leaves your soul hollow. I started taking sleeping pills. I stopped opening the mail. I stopped being me. But numbness never lasts. Grief curdles into fury when it's ignored long enough. I began digging. Late one night, I opened an old email account I hadn't touched in years. Buried deep in a chain between my father and their old estate attorney, I found something that made my breath stop. A timestamp, a PDF. Subject: proposed transfer strategy, co-occupancy in future. He'd been planning this over a year ago, a full year before the bakery sold, a full year before Kyle needed help. They weren't reacting, they were executing. This wasn't miscommunication, this was invasion. And now it was war. I wasn't looking for a revelation when I clicked the video. It auto-played after something else, an interview maybe, or some forgettable news clip. But the title caught me. The Golden Child and the Family Scapegoat, a breakdown of toxic systems. The therapist's voice was calm, almost too calm. She spoke of patterns, families that weaponized love, parents who chose one child to elevate, another to sacrifice. Not because one was worse, but because one was useful. I paused halfway through and stared at the screen. Everything she said was my life. Not in broad strokes, in detail. The subtle shaming masked as concern, the reframing of blame, the false narratives. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't dramatic. I was the scapegoat in a long-running family script. I watched the video again, this time with a notebook. Then I searched more. Articles, forums, books. I devoured it all. By dawn, I had filled 10 pages with examples, dates, quotes, behaviours. A lifetime of buried memory lined up in columns like a courtroom exhibit. It wasn't just a family, it was a system. And I had been playing my part too well. That afternoon I met with Clara, a friend from college, who now worked in real estate law. She listened, quiet but focused, as I explained everything. Kyle's move-in, the forged papers, the shifting of my personal photos, the co-ownership stunt. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms and said, "If this is documented, you're not in a family dispute. You're in a criminal situation. This is property fraud, Madeline, possibly even trespassing if you can prove malicious intent." I stared at her. "But they're my parents," she nodded, "and I exploit that night. I slept for the first time in weeks, deep, dreamless, uninterrupted. By morning, I had a plan. I became the version of myself I hadn't seen in months. The Madeline who made checklists, who colour-coded files, who didn't flinch when faced with chaos. Except now the stakes weren't quarterly reports or client satisfaction. The stakes were me, my identity, my home. I started small. I copied every document, deed, bills, communications. I labelled everything, indexed it, stored backups on cloud drives and USBs. I documented dates, times, changes in household dynamic. Then I bought a set of discrete cameras. The house, now a battleground, became a silent witness. I set up recording devices in communal areas, kitchen, living room, hallway. I wore a voice recorder on me every day. Every interaction was evidence. At the same time, I built my circle. Clara handled legal. Rachel, my therapist, helped me process the emotional toll and craft firm boundaries. And Lisa, my best friend since high school, checked in daily, sometimes just sending "breathe" as a reminder. I didn't confront anyone. I smiled when expected. I played my role. I waited. And then it happened. It was a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from a quiet dinner out, alone on purpose. I turned on my laptop, pulled up the latest footage, and scrubbed through it, absent-mindedly, while sipping tea. At the 47-minute mark in the kitchen, Mum stood beside Kyle, whispering low but clear. Her tone was syrupy. "She's spiralling," she said. "Let her cry, let her scream. Eventually she'll burn out." "Then that's what she always does." Kyle chuckled. "You think she's close?" "Oh, she's close. Just a little more pressure. Then she'll give us what we need." I froze. Tea spilled across my lap. I didn't feel it. She knew. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't misguided parenting. This was manipulation, strategic manipulation. They weren't waiting for me to come around. They were waiting for me to collapse. And maybe I would have, if I hadn't heard it with my own ears. I watched it again. Then again, every time, something inside me calcified, hardened. They didn't just violate my space. They planned it. They spoke of me like a pawn, a barrier, an inconvenience. They never wanted a relationship. They wanted compliance. I backed up the video to 3 separate drives. Then I closed my laptop. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel helpless. I felt ready. 15 days. That's how much time I gave them. I had the notice printed, signed, and delivered by courier. A legal cease and desist demanding they vacate my property within 2 weeks or face formal eviction and criminal charges. Attached was a 26-page packet, complete with timestamps, video transcripts, and a formal lawsuit citing property fraud, coercion, and trespassing. I expected chaos. What I got was silence. For 3 days, no one said a word. Kyle avoided me completely, locking himself in what used to be my office. My mother floated through the house like a ghost, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. My father sat on the back porch for hours at a time, smoking, something he hadn't done in years. Then came the retaliation. On day 4, a letter arrived, not legal, emotional. A carefully worded complaint, typed by someone else but signed by Kyle, sent to my attorney alleging that I was unwell, that I'd suffered from emotional instability in the past, that my recent actions were the result of untreated anxiety and paranoia. It was laughable, predictable, but I'd prepared. Clara submitted a letter from my psychiatrist, complete with dates, evaluations, and a clean bill of mental health. I even included my medical records. Painfully invasive, but necessary. I wasn't the one unravelling, they were. Still, the moment I read Kyle's letter, something stung. Not because it might work, but because it meant he was willing to destroy my credibility. My entire self, just to hold on to something he never earned. By the end of the week, the house had become a war zone in slow motion. Kyle began throwing tantrums, slamming doors, playing music loudly at night, leaving dirty dishes everywhere. My mother whispered about me on the phone, loud enough for me to hear. My father stopped speaking entirely. Then the phone rang. It was my Aunt Elaine, my mother's estranged sister who I hadn't heard from in over a decade. Her voice cracked on the second sentence. I saw the filings. I held my breath. She continued, You did what I couldn't. 30 years ago, your mum did something similar to me. Took control of our parents' house after their passing. Cut me out. Told everyone I didn't want it. Why didn't you fight back? I asked, already knowing the answer. Because I was alone, she whispered, and because I didn't think anyone would believe me. That night, I didn't feel alone anymore. The next few days moved fast. Clara filed a restraining order, which was granted temporarily. A court date was set. Kyle received notice of IRS scrutiny. Apparently his crypto losses weren't just emotional, they were financial and deeply suspicious. A flag on one of his transfers had triggered an audit. My father, under legal pressure, admitted during a deposition that he'd altered paperwork without full understanding of the consequences. My mother claimed ignorance. The courts didn't buy it. The media didn't help either. Someone leaked the court documents. Maybe Kyle, maybe a bitter friend. Local news picked it up. Successful woman sues parents and brother over property fraud. Social media split down the middle. Some people sympathised, others judged, but the truth stood on record, unmoving, undeniable. The final hearing was quiet, sterile. The judge read from notes. Kyle sat, stone-faced, his eyes hollow. My parents stared straight ahead. I spoke only when asked, clear and deliberate. The court ruled in my favour, full ownership reinstated, restraining orders made permanent, civil penalties applied to Kyle and my parents, damages awarded, all three removed from my property within 48 hours by law enforcement. Should they resist? They didn't. Kyle left first, carrying a duffel and a glare. My father followed, not saying a word. My mother lingered. At the door, she turned to me and said, "You'll regret this. Blood is blood." I didn't flinch. So is betrayal. She left. The house was mine again. Quiet. Still. In the weeks that followed, the fallout continued. Kyle's finances crumbled, frozen accounts, seized assets. He moved in with an old friend, but word spread fast. No one wanted to partner with a con artist in denial. My parents faced fines. Their reputation tarnished. Old friends distanced themselves. Their carefully constructed image cracked under pressure. They tried to rally sympathy, church groups, neighbours, distant relatives, but it didn't work because no one believed them anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I painted the walls. I cleaned the floors. I threw out the photo with Kyle in the centre. I planted herbs in the backyard. I learned how silence could heal, not hurt. But in the quiet moments sometimes, I'd wonder, how long had they been planning this? At what point did they stop seeing me as a daughter and start seeing me as an opportunity? The answer never came. Only the wind moving gently through my open windows, as if to say, "You're safe now." The air felt different now, lighter, like the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. The rooms were quieter, but not empty. They hummed with new energy, a kind of peace that only comes after the storm has passed and nothing remains standing except truth. I didn't burn everything down. I could have. There were more lawsuits I could have filed, stories I could have told, names I could have dropped. But I didn't. Not because I forgave them. No. Forgiveness wasn't part of the equation yet, but because I didn't want my life to orbit around the ruins of theirs. So instead, I created something new. It started small, a single recording on my phone. Just me talking late one night, after a walk. No script, no plan. I called it the silent room, a metaphor for the place in my house and in my life that had once been taken. I shared my story, just the truth, not polished, not dramatic, just real. I uploaded it, then forgot about it. A week later it had 14,000 plays. By month's end, it was 100,000, then 500,000. People messaged, wrote emails, left voice notes. They weren't fans, they were survivors of emotional abuse, of family betrayal, of the kind of invisible wounds that never showed up on police reports but left scars all the same. I wasn't alone anymore, neither were they. I recorded more episodes, interviews with therapists, read anonymous stories from listeners, shared the things I wished someone had told me 10 years ago. One night, after finishing a late session, I stepped outside to water the basil plant I'd been growing in the backyard. It was thriving, resilient. I smiled. That's when I heard the quiet footsteps. I turned, startled. It was Clara. She held a small stack of papers in her hand and a gentle smile. "I finalized the trust," she said. "It's official." I took the papers from her, heart thudding. I knew what they were, but seeing it on paper made it real. The adoption had gone through. Her name was Lily. 7 years old, quiet, observant, sharp as a whip, but cautious around adults. She'd been in the system for 2 years after being abandoned by a family friend. Her caseworker said she rarely spoke, rarely smiled. The first time I met her, she looked at me like I was another person who would leave. I didn't. Now she had her own room, her own toothbrush, her own drawer in the fridge, her own place at the dinner table. Family, I'd come to learn, wasn't inherited. It was built, choice by choice, brick by brick. She called me Maddie at first. Then one night, while brushing her teeth, she looked up in the mirror and whispered, "Mom?" I didn't cry then, but I did later, curled in bed, whispering yes to no one in the dark. We built new rituals. Sunday, pancake breakfasts. Friday, movie nights. Tell me something good talks before bed. She brought light into places I didn't know were still dark. Sometimes she asked about my parents, about Kyle. I told her just enough. The truth, in doses. She didn't need the burden, but she deserved honesty. One afternoon, while sorting through an old box in the attic, I found it. A letter. Tucked in a book, sealed with my mother's handwriting on the front. It was dated 2 weeks before the final court hearing. I held it for a long time. Curiosity clawed at me. A part of me wanted to know if it was an apology, a confession, a plea. But another part, the part that had learned to protect myself, knew something more important. I didn't need her words to validate my pain. So I slid the letter back into the book and closed it. Some endings didn't need to be reopened. That night, Lily and I curled on the couch, watching a nature documentary. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Do you think wolves know who their real family is?" I smiled. I think they do, and I think they protect each other, no matter what. She nodded, eyes heavy with sleep. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, the silence was soft, sacred. We were safe. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter. I felt like someone's home,